Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my Week 5 hidden gems for the 2025 fantasy football season. As we have all experienced over the course of the week, the snap that occurred on Thursday night not only knocked out players like Brock Purdy, Jawan Jennings, and Ricky Pearsall from our lineups, it also knocked out the entirety of the Rams defense and many of other players across the entire fantasy football landscape and universe, which going into this week is making it quite a struggle to set a lineup. So with all the bye week players out, with all the injuries that have occurred, I'm going to be talking about 6 different players that as of right now either first and foremost don't have a high rostership percentage or don't have a high start percentage as we approach week 5, so that we can help set our lineups and lead to a victory in week 5. Hope you guys are doing well. We're going to be talking all things fantasy, so if you guys are looking for my thoughts on a specific player, be sure to travel down to the description of the video as there are timestamps available there. Down in the timestamps, again, at the end of today's episode, I will be putting together a couple plays via Betr. For those of you who are interested in potentially following these plays for this upcoming weekend, or of course getting my rankings this upcoming Sunday and every Sunday for the remainder of the season for my email directly to yours, be sure to check out Betr. When you sign up using code Andrew, make that first time deposit minimum of $10 and make a first time play picking more or less on 2 player statistics within a real cash play. You'll be eligible to get those rankings by position, by tier, half PPR, and full PPR to set your lineups every single Sunday morning. New users who sign up using code Andrew today get a free $10, so check out the map to the right side of the screen to determine your eligibility, get those rankings, and of course be able to play via Betr. Thank you very much for all the support. All right, let's begin by talking about my week 5 hidden gems, beginning with our number 1, the soul stone of this week, Rico Dowdle. As we all know, the Soul Stone requires a sacrifice. And this week, unfortunately, the sacrifice is in the form of Chuba Hubbard, the starting running back of the Carolina Panthers, who in week 4 was obviously dealing with a bit of a calf strain. And as we approach this week, with Wednesday and Thursday DNPs in terms of did not participate in practice, he was trending in the direction of most likely not playing. And as we got the confirmation earlier today, hopefully you have already gone ahead and picked up Rico Dowdle. But as it currently stands, he's only rostered in 40% of sleeper leagues as I'm recording this video right now. And additionally, only being started in 21% of leagues on Sleeper, which is incredibly low numbers. When I went ahead and traveled on to Yahoo, 32% rostered, an incredibly low percentage. Every single league that has Chuba Hubbard as a starting running back should be picking up Rico Dowdle and starting him this week, because I absolutely, without a doubt in my mind, believe he's a top 24 running back option for week 5. Not only because of his individual talent, the opportunity share he'll be exposed to, but also the matchup. So let's talk about each of those things individually. Let's begin with the volume of opportunity that he is going to be exposed to this week. Thus far this season, the Carolina Panthers running backs from weeks 1 through 4 have averaged 22.25 rushing attempts per game, 6 targets per game, and 18.2 fantasy points per game. Again, a lot of opportunity leading to fantasy success. There's a reason why Chuba Hubbard is a weekly starter. Now, speaking of Chuba Hubbard and the opportunity share that he has been exposed to thus far this season, from weeks 1 through 3, he got 19, 15, and 19 touches in those 3 individual games. Obviously, this most recent week wasn't very much so of a competitive game. Therefore, they sat Chuba Hubbard in the second half for Rico Dowdle and Trevor Etienne to get himself majority of the workload and run out the clock. They had already replaced the quarterback to Andy Dalton, so it really wasn't a game in which I want to go ahead and utilize that for the purposes of understanding Chuba Hubbard's value that he is leaving available to Rico Dowdle this week. Now, speaking of Rico Dowdle's potential, when we have the 2024 Rico Dowdle in our minds, we all remember he was a starting running back of the Dallas Cowboys last season from weeks 4 through 18 when he was fully given the exposure to opportunity. Over the course of that season, in games where he was given 15 to 19 touches, was averaging 11.88 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format. Obviously had many of games of over 20 plus touches, which we're hoping is going to be the case, as we typically know that Dave Canales, the head coach and the primary play caller of the Carolina Panthers, typically wants to utilize one singular back, and that will be the case here with Rico Dowdle. Now, the matchup this week is quite advantageous. They're taking on the Dolphins, which are, yes, a middle-of-the-pack matchup, but they're still allowing 12.5 fantasy points per game on the ground alone via rushing statistics. And if it wasn't for Daniel Jones and Drake May both scoring rushing touchdowns in their contests against this Miami defense in weeks 1 and 2, that's 3 rushing touchdowns that could have been added to the scoreline of running backs, leading it to a 17.0 fantasy point per game average, as the Miami Dolphins have also allowed 4.73 yards per carry on average to opposing running backs at the top of that conversation. So when we have the opportunity of Rico Dowdle, who already this season has established himself as the red zone running back, he has in terms of attempts inside the 5-yard line, 5 in comparison to Chuba Hubbard's 2. Again, they prefer him as the goal line back. They prefer him as an early down runner, as he has demonstrated that in his days with, of course, the Dallas Cowboys, but even last season as the primary running back of the Dallas Cowboys, 49 targets and 39 receptions. Therefore, he is a 3-down back in all of the entirety of this upcoming week. The exposure to opportunity will be there, especially considering, like I mentioned earlier, they are targeting their running backs in Carolina 6 times per game. In my mind, he is an easy top 24 running back. He should be picked up and started blindly this week as an advantageous matchup is ahead, taking on the Dolphins. All right, let's move on to the next hidden gem. We have Rachaad White, who is this week's reality stone. The reality of the situation is that Bucky Irving, for the entirety of this week, has been in question as to whether or not he was going to play. And once we heard on Monday that he was in a walking boot and with crutches, and he was getting multiple opinions from different doctors, we all knew to pick up Rachaad White off of the waiver wire. Now, if you had the opportunity of doing so, you had the priority, or you utilized the correct amount of fab in order to accomplish this, congratulations, because you, in my mind, have potentially a running back that is not only a potential top 15 option, but maybe even better this week based on the opportunity share that we have seen Rachaad White exposed to in the past and how effective he has been within this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. Now, when we talk about Rachaad White, this is the first time that he is going back to being the de facto starter of this offense since week 1 of the 2024 season, or the entirety of the 2023 year, where he finished as a top 12 ranked running back that season with the full exposure opportunity and not much competition. So now that we exclude Bucky Irving from the competition of this backfield, sure, Sean Tucker is in here and we'll talk about him in just a moment, but this is a running back that is currently only being started on Sleeper in 33% of leagues, which is quite surprising to me. The fact that he isn't 100% rostered first and foremost is a surprise, only 69% as of the recording of this video. Should be at 100%, as every single league that has Bucky Irving should be starting Rachaad White this week. Nonetheless, when we talk about the opportunity share that he is going to be exposed to, it's going to be very similar to what he saw in his 2023 campaign with his team as the primary RB1. Thus far this season, the running backs of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers averaging 23.75 rushing attempts per game, 7 targets per game, and 21.73 fantasy points per game as a backfield. Over the course of the last 4 weeks, Bucky Irving's opportunities have led to 18, 23, 29, and 20 touches. And let's take into account majority of these games were competitive, but also Baker Mayfield led this team on, winning drives at the end of game in majority of these contests. So even when they were down, they were continuing to put themselves into positions in which they are making plays late in the game in order to go ahead and find themselves victorious. Now, when we talk about the potential of Rachaad White, when we look at his 2023-2024 statistics in games in which he was given 18 or more touches, averaging 18.31 fantasy points per game in those 13 contests. That's the level of success he has found with that elite level of workhorse back opportunity share. Now, last season, once Bucky Irving really got himself going and started to take over this backfield, from week 7 through 15, we did see a split between Rachaad White and Bucky Irving, primarily because, of course, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans were both out. And in those opportunities, Rachaad White was a monster. Throughout that span of time, weeks 7 through 15 last season, 10.5 attempts per game, 3.63 targets per game, and 17 fantasy points per game in a half PPR scoring format, having scored 9 touchdowns in those 8 games. Now, if we can get back to that kind of opportunity share to where he is getting somewhere close to 14 opportunities per game, which isn't the case thus far this season, but if we can get back to that, of course, the sky's the limit for someone like Rachaad White, who is playing at his all-time best as of thus far this season in terms of his running efficiency. In 2022 and 2023 in his career, both of those seasons led to less than 4.0 yards per carry on average. 2024 was better with a 4.23 yard per carry average, but this season 4.7. He's currently at an all-time high and now has an opportunity of taking on the second toughest matchup at the running back position against the Seattle Seahawks. I understand the Seahawks are only allowing 3.26 yards per carry on average to opposing running backs, and this is going to be a stonewall defense, but the fact of the matter is there's a lot of talent up front for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers rushing attack, and I'm expecting, regardless of what he's able to accomplish on the ground, for a lot of his receiving statistics to be able to carry him. Because thus far this season, the Seattle Seahawks have allowed the following statistics to opposing running backs via receiving statistics, primarily because of their stonewall run stop defense. 8 targets per game, 6.75 receptions per game, 58.5 receiving yards, and 0.25 receiving touchdowns per game. Again, like I mentioned earlier, Tampa Bay is targeting their running back 7 times per game. Therefore, there should be a lot of opportunity for Rachaad White as a primary receiving back to find success. I mean, this most recent week against the Philadelphia Eagles, coming off of a game of 4 receptions, 5 targets, all while, of course, we saw Bucky Irving obviously dominating within that same statistic line. Nonetheless, I did want to mention the potential of Sean Tucker. Many of you may be picking him up to potentially play him. I know that this time last year in week 6, when Rachaad White went down with his injury and Sean Tucker and Bucky Irving split the backfield. They took on a New Orleans Saints defense that couldn't stop the run. Sean Tucker in that week went for 32.7 fantasy points when he was given opportunity. I just want to let it be known, Sean Tucker has only played 3 offensive snaps thus far this season. The last 2 weeks, he's played 0% of snaps. He is only now being activated and being a member of this attack because of the injury to Bucky Irving. Don't let that kind of cloud you from the potential of what Rachaad White is going to be able to bring to this offense in a game in which, of course, the receiving statistics from Rachaad White's scoreline are definitely going to be the mainstay in which we are looking to potentially expand upon, as the rushing opportunities may not lead to a lot of yards, but again, hopefully he's going to be the primary goal line back as we expect him to be. In my mind, easily a top 20 running back, if not top 15 by the end of this week. If you still have the opportunity to pick him up, please put him in your starting lineup. But additionally, on top of that, again, if he's not in your starting lineup yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. The next running back I wanted to mention is Michael Carter, a running back that I talked about earlier this week and I've talked about ad nauseum based on the fact that Trey Benson earlier this week had arthroscopic knee surgery and there's a potential in which he's going to miss 4 to 6 weeks. Therefore, the next man is up after James Conner's injury. We have Trey Benson and now it's Michael Carter and Amari DiMercato. And many of you guys have gone back and forth asking me regarding who is going to be the primary number 1. And I want to fully establish this once again that Michael Carter is in fact the man that is going to be taking over this backfield. As it currently stands, only rostered in 35% of Yahoo leagues, 57% of sleeper leagues, and only started in 26% of sleeper leagues, which confuses me because they take on the Tennessee Titans this week. But we'll get to that in just a moment. Why do I feel so comfortable starting Michael Carter this week? Well, first and foremost, from Michael Carter's own mouth this week, he says, going from the Pat Tillman Practice Player of the Week to being the starter in the next, he is already establishing from his own mouth that he is going to be the starting running back of this offense. And we're not surprised because, again, what we have seen from Michael Carter and the reason why he is stuck around this organization on their practice squad for year over year now, it's because they want to expose him to these opportunities that when a running back goes down with injury, of course, he can step up and ball out. Now, besides this, coming from his mouth, we saw last week Michael Carter active alongside of Trey Benson and Amari DiMercato as they took on the Seattle Seahawks. In that game, Michael Carter only played 4 total snaps. But of those snaps, 2 of them on early down, first and second, 1 of them on a short yardage situation, and 1 snap in 2-minute drill. In comparison to Amari DiMercato, who played 26 total snaps, only 3 on first and second down, in comparison to Michael Carter's 2. But again, DiMercato's overall snap share, 26 compared to 4, obviously was because DiMercato is a primary 2-minute drill and third down back. He played 7 snaps on third down, which was the dominant force within that category, as Trey Benson only played 1 snap on third down. And then, of course, DiMercato 16 snaps on the 2-minute drill, in which we only saw Michael Carter play 1. Otherwise, he dominated there. Earlier today, the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, Jonathan Gannon, specifically said, when asked about these 2 running backs, they each have their own roles. So if we're defining the roles of this backfield based on their contributions last week, DiMercato, once again, is going to be the third down and 2-minute drill receiving back of this offense, while the early down contributions are going to go to Michael Carter. And this isn't out of the norm for the Arizona Cardinals offense, as earlier this season when Connor and Benson were both healthy, Connor was the early down worker and Benson took care of the third down and 2-minute drill contributions. And going forward, this is going to be the case with Michael Carter and Amari DiMercato. So with Carter taking over this early down role, the assumption is that he has an advantage with not only this upcoming matchup, but for the volume of touches that he's going to see going forward. I mean, first and foremost, when we talk about his contributions in the past, specifically at the end of the 2024 season, when all other Cardinals running backs were down with injury, you know, in week 17 and 18, week 17 had himself 9.1 fantasy points, 13 carries for 70 yards, 2 receptions, 11 receiving yards. Week 18, 17 carries for 43 and a touchdown, 4 receptions for 16 receiving yards, and 13.9 fantasy points. Great contributions in the absence of these other running backs. So he's built rapport and, of course, trust within the offense and the offensive coordinator. So taking on the Tennessee Titans this week, the number 1 matchup at the position, allowing 20.75 fantasy points per game, 5.0 yards per carry on average to opposing running backs, the 6th highest amongst all teams in the league thus far this season. This should be a run-heavy approach, just like every other team has deployed their running backs against the Titans. Once they take an early lead, they just continue to pour it on within the running game, and I'm expecting that to be the case within a run-first attack based on how this offensive coordinator has deployed their running backs in the past. He is this week's Power Stone. All right, let's move on to the Space Stone for this week. We have Sam Darnold. Look, as of right now, for those of you who are dealing with Lamar Jackson, Caleb Williams, Jordan Love, Michael Penix being out, and you are not in the position to where you have a solidified quarterback to start this week, perhaps all the names that I mentioned on this week's Thursday quarterback rankings video are not available in your league. Jackson Dart, Matthew Stafford were already picked up. You don't have the opportunity of going after a Jared Goff or a CJ Stroud. If those opportunities are all gone, I think the next best option going into this week truly is Sam Darnold, as they're taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And even though the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are technically a middle of the pack matchup, the 17th best at the quarterback position, allowing 13.82 fantasy points per game on average thus far this season, I truly do believe that Sam Darnold is going to be forced to throw the ball for a majority of this upcoming contest, primarily because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are only allowing 2.92 yards per carry on average to opposing running backs. They shut down Bijan Robinson to 24 rushing yards, Saquon to 43, and Breece Hall to 21. Therefore, the assumption is that, of course, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to once again impose their will upon opposing running backs. And even though, yes, this Sam Darnold-led Seattle Seahawks offense have the second fewest passing attempts thus far this season, only more than the Philadelphia Eagles thus far this season, with 103 attempts from the Seahawks quarterbacks, in comparison to their 112 rushing attempts from their running backs, a 52% rush rate, which is amongst the highest in the National Football League thus far this season. With this being the case, I still think they're going to have to air it out because that run-stop defense is legit. And we have seen over the course of the last 3 weeks, in games in which Sam Darnold has comfortably thrown the ball, 17.8, 16.72, and 16.08 fantasy points. And in one of those games against, the New Orleans Saints, only played 3 quarters. So if he's scoring 16 plus fantasy points easily in a 4-point per passing touchdown league, and we're going to be exposed to even more potential for upside from the likes of Sam Darnold, I'm expecting even more fantasy point contributions from him in a matchup in which he'll be forced to throw the ball. Taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense sure isn't easy. As of right now, they're running about 27% man coverage in terms of cover 0, cover 1, and cover 2 man. But ultimately, we know that, of course, both Sam Darnold and Clint Kubiak are very familiar with a Todd Bowles defense. Of course, Sam Darnold, when he was with the Carolina Panthers a couple years ago, obviously took on this Todd Bowles defense on multiple occasions. Last time out against them, 342 passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns. But I digress. Clint Kubiak, of course, last season was the offensive coordinator of the Saints. Now this offensive coordinator of the Seahawks. Took them on last season. In both those games, Spencer Rattler had 40-plus passing attempts against a Todd Bowles defense. Therefore, I'm assuming that this may be the first time this season in which Sam Darnold's really going to have to air it out. And when he has the opportunity to do so with JSN, Cooper Kupp, Torrey Horton, the slew of overall tight ends they have running routes for this team, primarily Barner and Arroyo, I truly do anticipate Sam Darnold to be a surprise potential play at the quarterback position this week. He's currently only rostered in 36% of sleeper leagues, 21% started. Honestly, I thought those were relatively high numbers. Maybe there's a lot of potential super flex formats out there, but ultimately for those of you who are in need of a potential pickup and play this week, I truly do think that what Sam Darnold can provide at home this week as the favorites against Tampa Bay should be enough to help you win your Week 5 contests. All right, let's move on to our next player. We have this week's time stone in the form of Mason Taylor. It was only a matter of time until Mason Taylor fully started to break out within this offense, and the Jets finally found their senses and unleashed their number 2 receiving option for the remainder of the season. Currently only rostered in 17% of sleeper leagues, started in only 7% of leagues. The slow ramp up to, exposure to opportunity has been very slow. Weeks 1 and 2, pretty much a non-factor within this offense, despite the fact that he's played 75% of the snaps and more every single week this season. But in week 3 against Tampa Bay, 5 targets, 4 catches, 18 yards. And in this most recent game against Miami on Monday Night Football, 7 targets, 5 catches, 65 yards, a 26% target share in week 4. And with the head coach of the New York Jets, Aaron Glenn, specifically coming out and saying, we got to do everything that we can do to try to get Mason more involved because he's a dynamic receiving option, that in itself is the stamp of approval that we know that Mason Taylor is going to be a huge part of this offense, not only this week, but for the remainder of the season. Like I talked about this offseason during the month of August, the offensive coordinator of the Jets is the former passing game coordinator of the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions have utilized their tight ends, and specifically young tight ends in the form of Sam Laporta, over the course of the last couple seasons at an incredibly high rate. So once we have the opportunity of Mason Taylor, this former LSU tight end, a son of a Hall of Famer, to potentially get himself more workload within this offense, in which there's so much more room for opportunity considering Garrett Wilson's really his only competition, expect for a lot of success. I mean, thus far this season, Mason Taylor only has 16 targets, 11 receptions, and 108 receiving yards. 13 of those targets that have led to 10 receptions and 92 yards are against zone coverage. The reason why I bring this up is because the Cowboys played 90+% zone coverage thus far this season, and I'm anticipating this Cowboys matchup to be a matchup in which we're seeing Justin Fields have to throw the ball for a lot of this game, especially considering they are one of these teams that give up a bunch of points to opposing receiving options. And we have seen them give up a fair share amount of points to opposing tight ends. Green Bay this most recent week, 6 for 62 from their tight ends. Chicago, 42 and a touchdown. The New York Giants, 4 for 34. Philadelphia, 8 for 45. A lot of receptions in those directions. So why not someone like Justin Fields? I mentioned this and I showed this on last night's live stream after the Thursday night game. Justin Fields' overall target, just chart last week against the Miami Dolphins, 20 total completions, but look at where the completions are. Very much so am I expecting Mason Taylor to get himself the vast majority of these opportunities. Just get the ball out of your hands quickly, move the chains. That is what Justin Fields wants to do. Not turn over the ball, look to a security blanket, and I believe this week and going forward, Mason Taylor is going to inhabit that number 2 receiving role within this offense, which truly will not only help Justin Fields, but also provide the next breakout tight end for the 2025 season. All right, let's move on to the final hidden gem of this week. We have Darius Slayton, wide receiver of course, the New York Giants as this week's Mind Stone. Look, in the last couple of weeks, we've talked about defensive starts at the Mind Stone, the Indianapolis Colts, and then, of course, the New England Patriots this most recent week, and they've balled out. But this week, I wanted to go ahead and highlight Darius Slayton based on the opportunity share that he is going to be exposed to in the absence of one Malik Neighbors. Currently only being started in 30% of leagues. For those of you who have an opportunity of picking him up and playing him this week, be sure to go ahead and give yourself the opportunity to do so, because last season, in the 2 games in which we saw Darius Slayton within this exact offense in terms of coordinator, in terms of head coach, sure, a different quarterback going from Daniel Jones now to Jackson Dart in the absence of Neighbors, but still, in those 2 games, 11 targets minimum in both games, scoring 22.2 fantasy points and 8.7 fantasy points and a half PPR. The expectation is that taking on the New Orleans Saints defense, who are the 13th best matchup at the position, allowing JSN for 96 and a touchdown, Horton in the same game 32 and a touchdown, in which they shut down the starters in the 4th quarter, could have stacked up even more statistics. Jennings 89 and a touchdown, Marvin Harrison 71 and a touchdown. All these number 1 wide receivers finding success. So why not Darius Slayton this upcoming week? We know that this most recent week was Jackson Dart's first start, and he was still trying to find himself his rhythm. Of his 20 total passing attempts, one of them being an out-of-bounds throwaway, so he had technically 19 passing attempts. 4 of them going in the direction of Darius Slayton is a 21% target share, a strong start thus far. Had a 16.0 average depth of target, which is also additionally strong, and of the completions that he had on those 4 targets, 3 of them being complete, 18, 17, and 9 yards. Again, huge plays down the field. But not only that, there was a play that many of you may have missed, that over the middle of the field, Darius Slayton runs a clean post route, pulls a defensive pass interference, and if it wasn't for that, he would have completed a passing touchdown in the direction of Darius Slayton, and I guarantee you wouldn't have had an option or opportunity to pick him up off of the waivers this most recent week unless you were going ahead and dumping a huge fab total or a higher priority. Nonetheless, with the opportunity of him not catching that ball and many people in your league potentially missing it, Darius Slayton has a lot of value this week, taking on the Saints in a script in which we are already sitting in a position where the New York Giants are underdogs as the away team against the New Orleans Saints. So if this at any point turns into a negative game script, expect for a lot of success for someone like Darius Slayton, who I am truly trusting to be a solid top 36 option this week. All right, that's going to cover it for my hidden gems. We're going to go ahead and put together a couple better plays before we end out today's episode. So let's go ahead and let's head on over there right now. All right, so let's go ahead and begin by putting together a couple plays in regards to hidden gems players. I want to first and foremost talk about Rico Dowdle, the thumbnail of today's episode. He is currently sitting at 1.5 receptions. We are absolutely without a doubt taking more on that. Why? Because over the course of this season thus far, Chuba Hubbard as the primary starter has gone more on that number every single game. But not only that, Rico Dowdle as the backup has gotten himself 1 reception minimum in every single game. Now you're wondering, Andrew, well, he only had 1 reception in each of these games. Isn't that a bad sign? No, he only had 1 target in each of those games. So with a greater opportunity share, again, with this, overall backfield targeting the running backs 6+ times per game on average thus far this season, I would anticipate an easy 2 reception game. Therefore, that is the first play that I want to go ahead and put together in regards to some of these hidden gems. Then if we continue on in terms of the potential of some of these other players, I like very much so RACHAAD White. And I also like his potential within the receiving category. If we go ahead and check him out, 2.5 receptions coming off of a game in which he had 4 receptions. But every single game this season, Bucky Irving has had 4 or more receptions. Now that he takes over that role, I'm expecting him to easily be able to surpass. Oh, here we go. He's going to be able to easily surpass that number. as again, we have seen Rachaad White thus far this season, every single game minimum 1 reception, but now that he's going to be exposed to even more receiving opportunities, therefore his number will increase. Then we continue on and let's talk about someone like Mason Taylor, who when we head on over here, we find him at 1.5 total receptions. Again, I think that's an easy number to be able to surpass. I don't see a problem with this at all. I would love it to be 2.5, but in the case in which you can get him at 1.5, I think that makes it easy. We've seen Theo Johnson with 4 receptions, Goddard with 7 receptions, Kraft with 5 receptions against this defense. I think this is a very achievable number as they continue to expose him to more and more opportunity within this offensive attack and approach. Now, you could potentially go ahead and take Jake Ferguson on receptions. Just wanted to, while we're at here, you know, this guy has had quite literally a ridiculous volume of receptions with, I mean, they don't even have his most recent game up here, by the way. It's not even updated. He had 7, he had 13. I mean, you know what? Actually, they don't have 2 of his last recent games. Honestly, this is, you know, while we're at it, we might as well just throw this to the mix. But that's going to be a different conversation. Anyway, let's close out in regards to some of these hidden gems. I want to go ahead and take Sam Darnold in terms of his overall passing attempts this week. In terms of going more than 24.5, I think that's an easy number to surpass, as thus far this season, very close to surpassing it in the week 1 contest against San Francisco. Easily surpassed it in 2 of the last 3 games. But in this New Orleans games, you have to remember they were up like 38 points in the first half. Therefore, they didn't have to throw the ball much. And of course, he got replaced in the second half by Drew Lock. Nonetheless, 24.5 attempts against a defense that is great in terms of stopping the run. I think that pretty much covers it there. So in regards to that first play, we'll put that together, send that through. The next play that I really do like is David Montgomery anytime rushing touchdown. The reason why I feel so confident about it this week is because he has scored 1 touchdown minimum in 12 of the last 17 games. In games in which they are blowing out opposing teams, he easily finds himself in the end zone. But earlier this week, I did hear a story in which David Montgomery specifically was saying that he is from Cincinnati. This is going to be the first game that his sister is going to be able to watch him play. Unfortunately, she had a very tragic accident a couple years ago in which she is paralyzed from the neck down. This is going to be the first time that she's going to be able to watch him play football in the National Football League. So I really do believe this is going to be a game in which the entire offense, the offensive coordinator, they're going to be aware of this. And they're going to be like, hey, let's get Demo into the end zone. I'm expecting that to be the case this week. David Montgomery, anytime touchdown, easily. Now, another player that, again, is almost a guarantee for touchdowns on a weekly basis based on his most recent contributions is James Cook. Over the course of the last 22 games that James Cook has played, regular or postseason, he has scored a touchdown in 18 of those 22 games. So an anytime rushing touchdown from, a guy like James Cook, in my mind, I think it's just too easy to pass up on. This is a player that has gone 8 consecutive regular season games with a touchdown. I mean, as of right now, on a ridiculous successful streak of touchdowns. So why not this week against the New England Patriots at home? Again, the Buffalo Bills haven't lost a home game since, week 13? Week 10, week 13 of the 2023 season. They've won the last 16 home games. So I'd expect a lot of success from the running game. And of course, for James Cook to find himself in the end zone for another consecutive game. So that's going to be another play that we're putting together. I wanted to go back to the Detroit Lions and specifically their backfield in the form of Jahmyr Gibbs. With him surpassing 97 total yards and 1 touchdown in 8 of the last 9 games, you can theoretically take him on an anytime touchdown this week very easily if you'd like. I'll take him at 79.5 total yards. I think that's a very easily accomplishable number as he's done it in 8 of the last 9 games in which he has played. So we'll take more on that. Another player that I really do like in terms of total opportunity share this weekend is specifically running back of this one and only Giants team, Cam Siadabu. As of right now, his current rushing attempts you can get at 14.5. This most recent week, again, is the first week without Tyrone Tracy. These most recent weeks before that, Tyrone Tracy was still active and contributing within this backfield. I would assume within the upcoming script, 14.5 rushing attempts should very easily be accomplishable for Cam Siadabu in a run-first approach. Then we, of course, want to go ahead and close out today's episode with Daniel Jones. As of right now, again, over the course of this season, his overall passing yardage over 200 every single week. Therefore, I want to continue to, just follow this streak. Considering the Raiders have allowed over 200 passing yards minimum to each of the 4 quarterbacks they've taken on this season, haven't taken on the greatest. I think 200 passing yards for him in this upcoming contest should be an automatic. That's the final play that we'll go ahead and send through for this upcoming weekend. The final thing I wanted to mention before we close out today's episode is in regard to Patreon. Again, for those of you who are interested to getting rankings every Thursday and Sunday, getting your questions answered from my directly to you in regards to waiver wire pickups, trade questions, starter sit questions, and of course, if you want exclusive Patreon only Discord server access, all this available via the Patreon. For those of you interested, check out the link down in the description. Thank you everybody for watching. I'll be back tomorrow live streaming as early as 9 a.m. PST, Sunday morning as early as 6 a.m. PST, and until next time, I'll see you guys. Peace.